Hey everyone, it's Tyler back with another video. This week I'm breaking down acceleration, why it's so important, and I'm also going to talk about the biomechanics and physiology of it and some of the things you can do to get the most out of your acceleration technique. The most important thing to know about acceleration is that there is nobody who's bad at accelerating that can reach a really high top speed. If you look at elite level athletes compared to amateur athletes, they're faster every single step of the way. And that might sound really obvious, like duh. But I think this is really interesting because it does mean that at some degree, you're going to be limited by how good you are at acceleration. And if you're not a good accelerator, that hurts you in two ways. Not only are you going to be slower in the sections where you're accelerating, so in the first 30 meters, if you're not a good accelerator, everyone's going to beat you in those 30 meters. But it also means they're likely reaching a higher top speed and that they're going to continue to pull away from you later in the race. It's really unlikely that you're going to beat them by having really good speed endurance or by having really good top speed if you're not also a really good accelerator. Now, this video is actually going to be broken up into two parts because I think it's a little too big to tackle all at once. This week, I'm going to break down some of the biomechanics and the physiology of it, and I'm going to have a workout at the end that's going to have some of the things that I talk about in this video into drills and exercises that you can add right away. And next week, I'm going to have a second video talking about some of the technique, how to actually start when you're in the blocks, and some drills you can break down to really get better there. Now, one of the biggest concepts when talking about early acceleration, specifically that first step, is talking about levers. And there are different kinds of levers. They're called first class, second class, third class levers. And all the difference is where is the fulcrum, which is the point that you pivot around. So in your elbow, this is the fulcrum. And then the weight or the resistance and the force. The force is you. The force is your bicep muscle. And the resistance is if I were holding a weight or the weight of my arm, that's going to be the resistance. And I like to think about levers as a fight between you and the resistance. And whoever has the advantage is whoever has the longer lever. And so the difference between a second class and a third class lever, in a second class lever, you, the muscle, have a longer lever. So that would be something like the ball of your foot. When you're using a second class lever, you have the advantage because your muscle is pulling on a longer lever than your body weight is coming down on the joint. And so a third class lever is the opposite. If you look at something like your knee, the resistance has a longer lever than the muscle pulling on it. And so the resistance has the advantage. The reason this is so important is that when you're unlocking your ankle and foot and using them properly, it acts as a huge force multiplier. Even if the soleus and gastroc, your calf muscles, aren't the strongest or producing the most force, they're going to be amplified by the kind of lever that they are. Whereas you have to get your hips and thighs much, much stronger to have the same effect because they're at a disadvantage. What this means in a practical sense is that you need to be very good at using the ball of your foot as a hinge, and that you need to have a very high degree of strength in your hips and thighs to make up for the fact that they're at a disadvantage. And when it comes to the biomechanics of your first step of acceleration, I do like to think of it in the same way that you think of vertical jump training. Because at the end of the day, they are really the same motion. It's just about whether you're producing more horizontal force or more vertical force. But the same levers apply because you've got the same body. And at the beginning of this video, I said that elite accelerators are better every single step of the way. And that includes your very first step. And I think the first step is really important because it's going to set up how you project yourself for the rest of the race. There are people who have very quick steps at the beginning of a race, but they're not actually moving their center of mass forward very far. This would be like somebody that can do a high knee drill really, really fast, but they're not able to have a high vertical jump. Those kinds of metrics are really important because you're looking to move your chest across the finish line. Elite athletes also have very good impulse when it comes to their acceleration. So not only do they put a lot of force into the ground, but they're doing it in a short amount of time. And this requires a couple of things. One is a high level of strength, but the other is the ability to deal with the slack and to be able to create tension in the muscles quickly. There's a study out there that looked at the limiting factors of sprinting. And one of the things that they found was that the ability to produce force quickly was more of a limiting factor than where along the muscle length people were able to produce the most force. And the reason for this is that you don't spend a lot of time in acceleration at super duper stretched out positions. If you get to 95% of your triple extension, but you produce way more force because those leverages are more favorable, then that's going to have a really good impact on your acceleration. And the reason that muscle length is even important at all is because our muscles work a little bit like patches of Velcro. When you overlap Velcro one-to-one, you have the strongest bond, but as you slide them and less of the surface area is matched up, you have a weaker bond. Your muscles do the same thing. When your muscle is stretched all the way out, only a few of the fibers at the ends are touching, and so you're not able to create as much force. So now we're at a little bit of a crossroad because we want really high degrees of leg strength, but we're also concerned with how quickly we can produce that force. This is why I think it's really important to have a mix of the more traditional strength training and also to have a mix of some of that plyometric training and have some more explosive tempo work. Here's the deal, when you're doing that explosive tempo work, I'm not worried about hitting full depth on a jump squat like I am with a regular barbell squat. Because when you're accelerating, you want to get into the most favorable positions where you can create the most force, and you want to do it in the smallest amount of time possible. So we're not really concerned with having a complete deep squat with the hip below the knee, because when you're accelerating, no world-class accelerator is trying to get their hip all the way below their knee for the entire time. So now we have a really good blueprint for the kinds of things we need to do to be a good accelerator. You need to be able to use the ball of your foot, and that means that you need to have really good foot and ankle stiffness. And I'll get to some drills that incorporate using the foot and the ankle as the limiting factor later in the video. But we also need a really high degree of strength in the legs. And on top of that, we have to be able to use the strength of our legs in a very short amount of time. And all four of these are really important. I'm not here to say that using the ball of your foot is more important than your overall leg strength or vice versa. What I'm saying is some of these traits are definitely more neglected. It's really unlikely that you as an athlete have never been in a weight room doing like a barbell back squat. But it's really possible that you've never been told how to properly hinge over your foot. I'm gonna wrap this video up by showing you guys some of the exercises I like to use in my workouts. And I'm gonna break down why they're important, what they're training, but also I'm gonna show you some of the key points that I'm focusing on in each exercise. Real quick, if you guys are liking this channel, be sure to like the video and subscribe for more. I have tons of content that's just like this, that's focused on getting you faster, and I really think you'll like the rest of the videos. This here is a first step drill that I really like to include into my workouts. All I'm worried about is being able to hinge over the ball of my foot. If you watch closely, you can see how my toes stay down as my heel travels forward. And here I just added some weights to make it a little more difficult and make sure I'm still hitting those positions. And here I've added in a vertical jump with kind of a split stance. That's supposed to help mimic the block setup. And I add a little bit of a drop there so that I'm forced to produce a lot of power in a very short amount of time. And this is the same drill basically, except for I'm focused more on my calves and ankles instead of my thighs. This one is a little bit of a mix. It's kind of hard to say where it fits because you're starting from a standstill, so you have to produce a lot of force, but also you're switching the legs and absorbing that force as you land. And this right here is honestly just some very simple strength work. Like I said, I think it's good to include a variety of things. And this is just to build up the muscles in the glutes and the hamstrings. And you can turn it around if you've got a cable machine like this. You can face the other way and also work on your hip flexors. This is one that I really like. This is like a Chris Corfist specialty, but it helps work on the extension of the hamstring from the hip and from the knee at the same time. And I wrap up here with some assisted Nordics. I think I was going for sets of 12 here. And because of a hamstring pull I had about a month ago, they're not super strict, but I still think you can get a lot of value out of them, even if you have to assist it a little bit. And here I'm doing more vertical and horizontal split stance jumps, but I'm worried less about the force that I'm producing, and I'm really making sure that I'm focusing on hinging over my big toe. As always, thank you for watching, and if you have any questions, go ahead and drop them below in the comments.